here we are. We're at the FUTO studio. I'm here with Lewis, Harpo, Aidan, and myself. We're going to talk about open source and kind of, as a general thing, how is open source helping solve these problems, and why isn't it doing a better job? From my perspective, I've historically been a Silicon Valley person who has done proprietary software, and we used open source very much, but we would always put the polishing layer on things to make things better. When I decided I wanted to really get serious about fixing these problems, my first question was, why hasn't the open source community already solved this? We have a billion people who can program computers now compared to 100,000 or so when I was growing up. Why aren't these people fixing these problems? So to me it's an ongoing open topic. I do feel like it only takes a few people to make a really, really delightful piece of software, and we've seen that happen many times. Perhaps a few more to really polish it and get all the services running. So why don't we have better software?
I think 99% of the people that use open source software don't pay or contribute to it, and the people that make the software don't want to be broke. So if they have the opportunity to make $200,000 or $400,000 working for somebody else, or they can make, I don't know, like some of the projects that I really love and use. I've seen XFC on certain websites, fundraisers, where it's one of the best desktop interfaces I've ever used, and they're making like $3,200 or $4,000 a year. Like, that has to be a product of passion, and at some point, people, like, the passion will eventually run out, and people will decide, I'd really like to go make $300,000 a year to build something else. And I think another part of it is a lot of the engineers, at least from working here for the last 9 months, I've noticed a lot of engineers don't like asking for money. And then when asked, would you like to take money with no strings attached to continue doing what you're doing? It's surprisingly difficult to get a response. It's like, so if somebody comes along and says, we'll pay you $300,000 a year to code, you never have to deal with people or ask for money, or you could keep doing what you're doing, like a lot of them are probably going to take the path of least resistance. And then you're stuck with this program that's like 80% of the way done, but the last 20% that needs to be fully polished for it to be a perfect end user product is just left out there in the ether, where anybody could go and finish it. But
yeah, I mean, part of it's just the asking, like setting up those details to get paid. It's not something that is really, there's not really the ecosystem there for an open source developer to kind of plug into something and say, I want to get paid.
Well, that isn't really, there's GitHub sponsors now, there's Open Collective, there's PayPal. There are a lot of ways, I think, to fund software like this. It's just people aren't paying. Maybe it's hard to kind of manage. Let's say you use like 20 pieces of software, or you use this, like in the case of like the Core.js stuff that's happening recently, you get like one of like 20 dependencies to like very core pieces of software that you don't pay for yourself, but you use all the time. I think it's just the ability. There's also like NPM Fund now. The ability is there for people to pay. It's just people aren't.
I've met one person who paid for Signal. Soon to be two. I feel guilty, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's easier than it's ever been before for people to actually put in a credit card and have it go to a developer. The only inconvenience is from the fact that payments aren't totally monopolized. They're not all in one spot, but it's probably a good thing in the end.
So it's just that people are choosing not to pay, because I would say, compare the experience of building a proprietary piece of software that's integrated with Apple Pay in the App Store. There's parts of the app that are locked away until you actually buy the app, or there's this trialware, or there's whatever. There's millions of different ways that you can charge money in the App Store, but open source developers never use these features.
Is there a cultural the condemnation of asking for money in that community? I know among YouTubers, at least, the people will be happy to load their videos with ads, but the idea of saying, hey, I would like to upgrade to this new office or get this new tool to make videos, here's a Patreon. There are so many people that feel so afraid to do that because they feel like everybody's going to start calling them an e-beggar, or you're greedy, or you're an asshole, or a piece of crap because you decided to ask for money. Does that exist for open source software developers? Like, do people feel bad asking for money? Or awkward? I don't think they should. The way I say is, what you're calling an e-beggar, when you decide to put on a suit that you usually wouldn't wear and write 3 pages to try to convince somebody after waiting in line that they should hire you, like, you're asking for money. But doing it on a website or in an IRC channel and saying, hey, I made this piece of software. If you like it, it would be great if you paid me. It seems like there's some sort of stigma.
It's really weird. I do feel there's people are more likely to want to spend money. They feel better about it even if they're just being told this is how much it costs to use. And then they pay it and then they're done. When it's like begging, it's like, oh, my mind goes into charity mode now. And I'm thinking, oh, does this person really deserve the money or not? Things like that.
What are they spending it on? Or that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you would, nobody who uses, I don't know, Google Maps thinks to themselves, is the person who's contributing to this driving a Porsche. But like the moment that's, I don't know, let's say like the OpenStreetMap person or like a organic maps person is like, driving a car that's not a, 1994 Toyota Celica or something. They're going to go, aha, that's what you're doing with my money. And it's somehow mean and evil.
So I don't know. Like, I mean, we're using Zulip now. We're like paying for I don't know if you set that up yet, but we will be paying soon.
Oh, I didn't know that was my response.
Well, Lewis is going to help you because he's got the credit card.
Okay.
We'll do that. Cool. We're going to do that.
So yeah, we're trying to do that kind of stuff more. But I don't know. It's
It's easy to forget. It already works and you're not paying for it.
Yeah.
There's so many things in your life that you need to pay for. I need to go and pay to get eggs at HEB. I don't have to pay for Zulip to work. So it just, even when you want to pay for it, it just falls by the wayside.
Yeah. So if Zulip were like, fuck you, we're turning off now because you've been using it for 2 months and you haven't paid us yet, well, then we would pay.
We would pay today.
Yeah. Then we would pay immediately. And even though it's open source, sure, we could spend time trying to get the download and build it ourselves and like take out whatever paywall code is in there, but we'll just pay. Like that's the right thing to do. So I don't know. I feel like the culture of open source needs to embrace capitalism more. I think that's Harpo and I were at FOSDEM, and capitalism was almost treated like a dirty word by some of the people there.
What gave you that impression? Because I didn't go.
There was one talk where the guy was like, he was almost apologizing. He had the word, this is inherently a capitalistic venture, was on one of his slides. And he was like apologizing for and he was kind of not apologizing that, so we have to understand. So he was actually talking a little bit about how to do open source startups. Because they are becoming a bigger thing. We have lots of kind of licenses around this now to try to do open source startups. And apparently there's some controversy in the open source community whether or not these companies can even use the word open source without, causing certain people to get upset. I don't quite understand the culture. I'm new to it. So
me, capitalism is something provided me value, I will pay you in exchange. And the opposite. If I provided you value, I would ask for money in exchange. I don't see anything particularly wrong with it. But is there a specific criticism they had or something that aggravated them about it? Or outside of the fact that certain rooms might have had different ventilation based on the sponsor?
We can talk about that later. I don't know. I think Aidan and Harpo, you've both been in these circles longer than I have, even though I'm very old. In kind of what the sentiment is amongst the open source community.
Yeah, I mean, the act of paying for things is really kind of not usually a major restriction. Like even Stallman says, it's free as in freedom, not free as in free beer. If a company wants to say it's $5 a download, they can do that. Most of the kind of controversy is around questions of control, and that usually if you can charge for something, you can also do a bunch of other things to kind of restrict users. It's like in some of these business licenses, in the Elasticsearch land, for example, they kind of do place more restrictions. It's not just it's not like they're saying, oh, it's $5 for the download link. It's oh, you can't compete with us now, right? It's
and so the non-compete restrictions are what are piss people off. Then is that okay?
Yeah, it's like if they had a download, Stallman himself says this, if you have a link on your website and it says $5 to download, you can sell GPL software.
Okay.
Once you sell it, they can do what they want with it. But
put it on their website and then say it's free to download it, which is why.
That's why people think they need the non-competes. So the non-competes are trying to limit profitability to kind of the people most responsible for creating the software, I suppose, right?
Okay, so if you have GPL software and you put it on your site and you say to download this you have to pay, what's keeping somebody else from just allowing anybody to download it for free from their own website afterwards?
Yeah, with the GPL, there's nothing.
Yeah, so when Stallman's saying you can charge for GPL software, but it doesn't change the fact that it destroys your ability to be the exclusive person making money off of it. Like you could have one sale, but it doesn't change the fact that it then becomes a charity, which is you're hoping for people's goodwill to actually say, oh, this software was good, I will pay for it, versus screw that, I'm going to grab it off of this.
I don't even know if this is true. Like, you know, as because you remember like in the mid 2000s, kind of like everyone downloaded everything because that was just like the easiest way to get stuff, and you know, kind of everything was free in a sense if you were willing to, you know, open up a file sharing client. And then like out came Netflix and you know, Disney Plus and Hulu and all this other stuff, and you know, tons and tons of people will pay $10 just because it's a little more convenient. It's like that's the official way to get stuff. It's easy, and now like if you look at piracy, like I think it's essentially dead compared to, you know, it used to be the majority of the internet. Those movies are still available to download, and yet people are paying $10.
People will pay, but I think that it's different when you're talking about going on LimeWire and downloading. You know, your average person doesn't know the difference between downloading a movie and downloading, you know, avatar.mp4.exe and on his Windows XP Service Pack 1 versus just being able to go to a reputable looking download website that's legal and legitimate and just download a program that was otherwise $200.
Right.
But I hear what you're saying, which is like the good people are willing to pay for convenience, not just for the goodwill.
Right. So in the case of Zulip, you know, just as an example, we're not going to get fly-by-night Zulip because it's probably going to have all sorts of malware on it or something. We're going to get it from zulip.com. So they're in a position where they could probably have the most free license. They could have MIT license or whatever, and the people undercutting them would not be trusted. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's seen this with like a whole bunch of programs like Audacity off the top of my head, where you know there's this open source code base, and you go to these various websites to download it, and there's like you know, all these other versions which have kind of malware and adware added into them, and it's like you can download there, but like no one trusts those download websites anymore. Like, you know, a lot of times on SourceForge or something, you try to download a piece of software and it's just like totally malicious. Right?
I remember when SourceForge was trusted for a lot of things. I haven't used it much since the 2000s, but
I mean, the whole site is nothing but like, you know, banner ads trying with fake download buttons and stuff, right? It's
that's sad.
Yeah, but like, you know, the official site, like, you know, they got it's like, I'm not getting a virus from this. It's
I think part of what with piracy is you couldn't make a very convenient and easy professional looking site because you would immediately be taken down. Whereas with free software, you could easily, since it's not against the law, you could easily make a site that looks very reputable, that has a reputation, and take a piece of software that somebody else said is GPL licensed that was $200 and just put it up for free, which probably keeps people from doing it. I think like it still gives the asking, the begging for money vibe versus the normal method, which is you're forced to pay for it if you want it.
So I guess from my perspective, I just want to see more engineers kind of like who are capable of building the software that's as good as Google software, as good as Facebook software, whatever, building things, putting them in stores, and just getting paid and being recognized as by the people using their software that this is from this person. I want, when I buy the software, I'm paying this person, and other people trying to undercut this person because it's open source are assholes and or scamming me. But I also don't mind if this person does have a non-compete in their license. Like, I don't think that's the end of the world if the person is kind of recognized as the, you know, there's a term called benevolent dictator for life in the open source community. Like, if this person is recognized as that for this piece of software, and you know, contributors are like upset working for this guy, well, they can go create their new software. But that person having the exclusive right to make money off of this piece of software seems like it could work, or no? Like, where would it fail? Where would it break down?
In the case of these business licenses, like, it's not even like you can even use Elasticsearch and stuff to like run your business. It's just like the direct hosted thing. So their restriction is like quite small, right? It's like, you can still profit from stuff. You can still like tons of companies.
But like, let's use an example of video editing, right? Like Kdenlive is the best, is your favorite open source editor, but you never use it because it still sucks.
That's an accurate representation of reality.
It probably would only take a few really good engineers to make that as good as Adobe, in my opinion. At least for some people, probably for Lewis, it would take a few people to really whip that into shape. What would be wrong with saying they're the exclusive? Like setting up a license where like this is open source because it's important, like because of the reasons why things need to be open source, which we already talked about. So it's open. So it's like, why can't they just say I have the exclusive right to profit off of this? It's open source, but I'm the only one who's going to profit off of it. Where would that break down for Kdenlive?
Are you like forcing a restriction on, like, do you have to pay for it?
No, but you don't have to pay for it. But the one I distribute on my website, kdenlive.com, let's call it kdenlive.com. I'm distributing it on my website. It's open source. Everybody can contribute if they want to, but I'm the only one who charges for it. I sue people. If other people are charging for it, I sue them. If it's in app stores published by other people's name when charging for it, I get it removed. So I actually have a legal team actually maybe protecting my revenue source, right? But if I die tomorrow, then it becomes as the benevolent dictator of Kdenlive, it becomes totally free for everybody. But maybe nobody can charge. Maybe nobody can charge for it now. I don't know.
I mean, I think like saying like, oh, I'm the only person that's allowed to charge for this is like a very minor restriction, right? Especially if it's like a piece of consumer software, like a video editing program,
right?
But like, with that, like that restriction kind of isn't like Lewis, is kind of on the other side of this where, like, you can distribute that binary for free anywhere else, right? There really has to be a bias towards your payment thing and not the free download.
Yeah, and the bias would be, my trust. People trust me as being kind of like the, the best word I can think of is the benevolent dictator. I am, the person who people trust.
You're not going
to package it, right? Package it, make sure it works, like, everything. And then it's a pain in the ass to go to somebody else, and it becomes like, am I going to spend $5 for this guy, or am I going to like try to build it myself from whatever's from GitLab or whatever? I'll just pay this guy $5. Like, it's worth it. Like, I feel like the fact that he's charging me is completely reasonable. I just spent that much on a mocha at Starbucks. So it's like people are spending money all the time on all this crap in the app stores. So I feel like this is a tenable thing to have open source software start making more money and really get like giving engineers, younger engineers probably who are just kind of getting started and maybe don't want to go work for a big company, like, hey, I could just like write software the way I want to, make it super cool for myself and my friends. And I can actually make a decent amount of money doing this too. And we saw this more in like the 90s than we do now. I mean, we saw this with, Winamp, things like that. I mean, they might not necessarily been open source, but they were distributed by, they were by the person who wrote the software.
I feel like this kind of works for like the standard Windows desktop model where like, you go to VLC's website and you download VLC and then you install it. On most of the open source operating systems, though, like, you're not downloading any of your software from random sites on the internet. It's someone, that works for the distro maintainer. They package it up. You're typing a command to install it.
Sure.
When you
when you say like, oh, like they're the reputable provider that you're gonna go to their website. Like, if you're on an open source operating system, you're probably never going to that website.
Fair.
And it's like the distro maintainers are considered reputable.
I mean, okay, so Linux is fringe, first of all, right? And probably we do need to think about this in terms of app stores.
I mean,
right?
yeah, I mean,
that is how most people are getting these things. So the app stores need to have this kind of infrastructure, and they kind of do already. Unfortunately, Apple and Google take 30% or 30%, and they shouldn't.
I mean, in the world that exists now, like the only places that can really push you to pay for the software are the proprietary platforms,
right?
Like the iPhone,
Yeah. So, we were looking at. I mean, that's good, kind of good to start talking about F-Droid. Like F-Droid is the app store. It's the most open app store we have on, our de-Googled Android operating system, and it kind of has some things right now for like trying to get you to pay, but not really.
It looks kind of shady.
Yeah. Like you definitely can't integrate deep into your app a paywall. You can't have features that are unavailable, and then there's a payment like mechanism built into the app, where you put in your credit card and unlock features of the app. So I guess my belief is that something like that needs to exist, and there needs to be a vibrant ecosystem for people to pay for things, just like there is for proprietary apps. There's maybe a lot to gain. A lot of good could be done in that way, in those things on the de-Googled Android stuff.
Yeah, the F-Droid store, when you go into the app store, when you click on an app, it'll show you can link to where you want somebody to be able to pay for it. But that just, again, how many people actually click that? They're like, I just want to install the app. And if it's free.
If you look at like iOS, that's the way App Store was on iOS. In the beginning, in 2010, you would pay for an app when you downloaded it. That's gone now. Like hardly any app store makes money that way anymore. It's all you download the app, and then there's lots of features inside the app that are locked behind a paywall. So those sorts of things are what the open source community really needs to compete with if we're going to have a lot of engineers excited about writing software for it.
Simple Calendar has that. Like if you want to use the calendar app, it's free. But if I want to use it and have it sync with the Nextcloud server, I have to pay $1 or $2.
Yeah,
and I did because it's the only one that didn't suck. Every calendar app other calendar app wouldn't sync properly.
So did you get Simple Calendar off of F-Droid?
Yeah,
and then how was the?
I forget if it was F-Droid or the normal.
What payment mechanism did it use?
I think I got to look it up and see. I think it was the normal App Store, not F-Droid.
Oh, okay. So it used the in-app purchase in. Okay, that's cool. So it used the proprietary
it was Play
Google
Store
infrastructure to do an in-app purchase. Google made 30% off of that.
I will go to hell for this. Sundar made 90 cents off me, probably. Yeah.
But no, hey, that's still good, and that was worth it to you.
The F-Droid store, look, the problem with it is that a lot of the applications don't even have pictures next to them, but it just shows up as if a picture is supposed to be here, but it doesn't load. So it looks like a shady website. Like when I promoted NewPipe, most of the people were not going to the F-Droiders, they were going to the Play Store because it looked legitimate. And then downloading an app that was filled with malware and garbage in it, and then saying, this app has malware, why does it have malware in it? And it's like, I told you not to get it from...
Yeah, and that's what sucks. Like NewPipe is a great example. It's a great app. They refuse to put it in the Play Store because of Google's has all these problems, obviously. But then just these shady dealers just putting their own NewPipe into the Play Store, and the NewPipe team has in a normal capitalist company, you'd have your legal team go make sure those aren't on the Play Store. There's no that's something that's maybe more difficult to deal with. But
if you have like 5 college kids in an IRC channel, you're not going to have a legal team.
Yeah.
But like so many open source projects, 5 college students in an IRC channel.
But yeah, I mean, NewPipe is an example of something where the NewPipe client is a better client than what Google produces for YouTube. It's better, and it's just a few people in an IRC channel. So we don't have to have $100 million raised from VC to fix some of these problems.
You have to find people that are radically interested in doing that project, that are passionate about it for that specific piece of time. Because at some point, I imagine they're going to move on, and that project it's going to have to be passed down to somebody else.
Yeah.
You have the project that you work on while you're in college for fun, and then you have, okay, I'm going to get a job, and then that takes up all your time and everything else. You can only have so many things that take up your time. Yeah,
but if you're making what you should make, you'll be more likely to keep doing it.
And then that begs the other question: how many people here have paid for NewPipe?
I mean, does NewPipe even have a way to pay? I doubt it.
I think they have a donate button on the
Oh, they
side.
do? Okay.
The fact that I don't even know this is sad because
Yeah.
I've used the program and I like it.
Yeah.
It's like this is a lot of it is a cultural thing. Like, if you give something away for free, people they're just not gonna.
Yeah, I mean, in B2B land, this is like much easier. Like businesses like need to support contracts and all this other stuff, and like are usually willing to pay for things like just because, getting some certification requires like using software that's actually supported. I don't know, B2C land, it's just kind of like a totally different scene for getting money though. Like even in like the normal proprietary software ecosystem, like people don't pay to watch YouTube videos, people don't pay for their email. Most of the apps they don't pay for. When they install games, they might have microtransactions, but if you look at how those games make money, as far as I know, most of the money comes from like 1% of people who are horribly addicted to some mobile game. It's not most random people probably aren't paying much of anything, and so like what's left is you got advertising and data mining for the purpose of advertising.
Yeah, and the funny thing is too, like I'm guilty of this too. Like I don't want to pay for software sometimes, and then I go to Starbucks and I get a hot chocolate, and it's like $4. I'm like, okay, here's my credit card. It's kind of crazy the way that kind of we as humans value software versus literally anything else.
We get the software that we deserve. Like, I think the real red pill with all of this is that the reason that we're here is not because all of these people have decided to exploit us, but it's because we've demonstrated in 2004, when Gmail said, we will give you a gigabyte of free hosting and storage in exchange, just let us mine through your stuff and be able to have a robot read all of your email to advertise to you. Like, we signaled we don't value any of this. We don't value our privacy at all. Like, my $3 is very important. You will have to claw this out of my hand. I am not paying $15 for an album, even if it's my favorite album, because I can get it for free in Casa. But you can happily have access to all of my personal data. Like, we chose this, I think. And now we have to live with it.
Not everyone, though, right? So that's my hope. My hope is there's, 10%, 5%, even 2% of the world does care about these things and will change their behavior and start paying and make sure that make sure we're not getting abused by our computers or getting abused by the people who control our computers who aren't us.
I think I would say venture at least 80% of the people that complain about all of the data mining and the advertising and the tracking and everything else we have now are people that would have said in 2008, if Google Maps popped up and said like it's $10 for you to get access to this, would have said screw that, and or not donated.
I'm sure there are GPS apps out on the market right now that are better than Google Maps that you have to pay for, but I doubt anyone, or I don't know of any that exist.
Well, we like organic maps, so we're.
That loads your direction faster than Google Maps. Like Google Maps will give me this stupid little blue dot that doesn't show me the direction I'm going in. Or it shows it like this, and the organic maps one instantly shows you exactly.
Do you know why Google does that, right?
Well,
I mean, this is conspiracy land. They just don't want you thinking for yourself. They want you using their directions. They want you to just be told where to walk. They want you to tell them where to go, and they'll tell you which direction.
Yeah, but how are you supposed to know which direction? Like if it says walk southwest on this road, how do you know which way that is if you don't know which way you're pointing?
Just look at the sun. I don't know.
Use your compass.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think Google definitely doesn't want to make you smarter. They're more interested in like being in a position to like influence what you do. Probably you're right, Aidan. Probably it's not a top down.
I think it might just be a margin of error of the compass that they don't want to be liable for.
But I mean, I've noticed on Google Maps they don't. I'm a person who likes to just see the map, see the street names, chart my own path. My use case for Google Maps is like lowest on their priority list. They really want to just tell me where to walk.
You have to zoom in a lot to get all the street names. I've noticed. It's a lot of zooming.
But I don't know.
One other really difficult thing about open source software for like B2C stuff, and I agree with Harpo, is like if you're using an iPhone, like to be able to run your own software for over a day, you have to pay Apple $100. So if there's any software that you have that you want to kind of download and modify that's open source, the open source stuff, I guess like on iOS means you can read the source code, but you really can't modify it and use it or distribute it to someone else if you really want without paying $100 a year to Apple.
Because you need the developer license.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
Like unless you want to plug your phone into Xcode every day, like every 24 hours and reinstall the IPA. But like it's like it's impossible basically.
Yeah, I mean that goes back to my kind of running theme, which is like any hope we have does come from Android, just because there are still a few good people few good people at Google who would say, no way we're fucking implementing it that way. Like, we're going to let people keep sideloading. Like, I'm going to quit my job if you don't let people sideload on Android. So, whereas Apple is just, to me, it's a lost cause.
The interesting thing is what you brought up the other week, which is that Google was getting in trouble and fined for saying to manufacturers, if you sell devices that use Google Play services and everything, you cannot use these other modifications of Android, like the Fire TV, or Graphene OS, or anything else. So, but they still do make the Android open source project public. So they're getting fined for being half evil, whereas Apple is saying, we released the iPhone. iOS is closed source. When you buy an iPhone, you cannot run any operating system on it besides iOS. They've never been fined for this. But Google has been fined hundreds of millions of dollars for this behavior, which is still shitty, but technically worlds ahead of what Apple's doing when it comes to openness.
Right. Yeah.
So like that one engineer that said, no, you should keep the Android open source project open. The person that advocated for that might very well be the guy that's like,
yeah.
That's why you got that fine.
I mean, we'd love to talk to it would be fun to know what was the internal politics at Google for keeping Android open source project open, and, you know, all the different factions, and what the legal ramifications were for all their stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even the only project that they do. Like Chromium is like a huge code base, much like you know, the Android open source project, and it's like still open, right? Like
it's BSD, right? So could you turn that off? I don't know specifically about BSD.
Turn it off?
Like, can you just say, okay, we're gonna have a private fork now? I mean, I guess Chrome is a private fork. Never mind.
You can do whatever you want with it, really. Yeah,
and the really funny thing I think about Chromium is this: all these people were like, even Microsoft was like, okay, we don't really want to cede control to Google Chrome for all this stuff, so we're just gonna fork the Chromium browser, develop our own stuff, and now we have Brave, we have Edge. I think Vivaldi is a Chrome fork as well. All of these, like, if you disagree with kind of Google's browser, you can just fork it and make your own.
I do think that does come from, I do imagine there are debates inside Google over whether or not they should do these things, and any support we can lend to the righteous people inside Google, let us know like what we can do.
But that person must have been getting in trouble. Like the day that they got fined because in India, as a result of them not being able to run, like them saying Amazon cannot get a manufacturer to create the Fire TV. The person who decided to keep the Android open source project actually open was probably getting yelled at, saying, we did what you asked us to do, and like, look what happened. And then he must feel like, okay, well, I tried to do the right thing for everybody, and we got fined as a result of it anyway, and my bosses hate me. Like, great, I'm not going to do that again. And that sucks.
Yeah, it could
like,
be.
There has to be a lot of appreciation
like that,
shown for that person.
I mean, speaking of, you know, Google doing great work in open source, are we concerned, though, that companies like Google, and specifically Microsoft, who owns NPM, VS Code, and GitHub, having so much influence over how, you know, every single piece of open source software is built, and, you know, every single piece of JavaScript on your website probably went through NPM, which is a Microsoft service. You know, are we worried about those sorts of things?
I mean, the internet routes around censorship. It has been doing for years, and especially within developer circles. So I don't really think there's anything Microsoft could, I mean, maybe with NPM, but like, it's very possible to just have your own, like, you can just not use NPM. You can make your own package resolution thing.
Right. But in 2006, if you're a video creator, you could, you know, YouTube was the best place to upload, but you could also upload to a few other places. And now pretty much you're just nothing if you don't upload to YouTube. A software developer can still distinguish himself quite a bit without touching any of the Microsoft stuff, without ever uploading to GitHub even, right? But will that always be the case? Like, should we be worried about, you know, kind of what happened with YouTube and video creators happening to programmers?
I think the thing about YouTube is that, like, the really big feature is the distribution. However, you don't really use any of these developer tools for distribution. I mean, maybe GitHub, but like, you're probably going to be doing your distribution on other platforms that have network effects. So you're either going to be on Twitter or like word of mouth or like Hacker News or Discord or something like that.
And so with software, for software developers, that is the app stores, which we lost. We've been losing the battle there. So, I mean, we were getting canceled off of the app stores as programmers, in 2010, before lots of other people started getting deplatformed off various platforms.
Yeah. I think the real kind of thing that I'm worried about in terms of kind of strengthening restrictions on like developers for tools that already exist are like browser extensions. So if you look at kind of Chrome and Edge and all the new like Manifest v, basically there's a new version of the spec for what browser extensions can called Manifest v3, and it has a lot of restrictions in it that the previous ones didn't. The most infamous one is that ad blockers are a lot harder, which I think for obvious reasons, like Chrome was the one who suggested this change. So, I mean, you could argue that in some of these pieces of software that you think are still very permissive, like it is possible for kind of these large actors to kind of make it much harder for developers.
I disagree. Why would Google want to make ad blocking more difficult? No, we were talking with the NoScript guy like 6 months ago, and he was talking about all the details and how Manifest v3 makes it a complete and utter nightmare to run an ad blocker. And it's just so funny that Google seems to be the ones pushing for that.
Yeah, and everyone else is okay with it too. Microsoft could just choose to keep it on, but they're not.
I mean, they have an ad network.
They also have an ad network, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the problem where, as Google is the benevolent dictator of the Chromium project. They can't steer it in ways that are beneficial to Google. So we have to be worried about things like that.
Yeah, the fact that they keep Chromium open source is almost like a counterbalance, so that you can't claim that they're doing something evil when they do something like making it very difficult for ad blockers to continue to work. I think they learned something from what happened to Microsoft in the 90s. You can't appear evil. You can do horrible, evil shit if you just give the outward appearance of being a nice, kind, open, caring, progressive person that loves the world and wants the best for society.
I would be actually, maybe in the future I'd be more worried about something like GitHub, where, they have these like, GitHub sponsor stuff, and like, we want developers to get paid, obviously, but if that feature actually takes off and it's like how you get paid as an open source developer is through GitHub, at that point it's kind of a much more dangerous proposition, because then your livelihood is dependent on the site, and you really can't screw up. It's like, if you switch to GitLab or something, you're going to lose all of your income.
Right.
It's like,
yeah. So
that's that kind of like, as those features that developers need, like, they've been adding a lot of stuff as they add those features developers need, and then people become dependent on them, then it's definitely more dangerous. Right now, like, GitHub has a pretty big social effect, but like, the audience of like video consumers versus like software engineers, I think it's a pretty different audience. Software engineers don't have a lot of issue kind of jumping around different packaging systems and stuff, and different Git. Git
so if we're going to be working at FUTO to try to develop some of these ecosystems, and yeah, absolutely, we need to make the payment mechanism to be as agnostic as possible with any of these kind of ecosystems, if we want to kind of protect the programmer, and letting the programmer, the same way we want video creators to have a direct relationship with their audience, and we want programmers to be able to have a direct relationship with the people running their software, and not have these middlemen causing all these problems. The app developer doesn't even decide to put bad stuff in their app now. It's just automatically there from because you want to do push notifications in your app, which is a nice feature you want. Google will automatically put all this crap in your app that does all the tracking and all this stuff, right? If you want to strip that stuff out, then it's like an extra week to do push notifications without all the other stuff Google wants in your app. You got to figure out how to like split that out. It's just a really messy system they've created.
I mean, they've made it life easy for so many people. If they give you a way to do something without spending a week, searching Stack Overflow for somebody else's code to steal, and it just so happens to have tracking in it. Like, they're trying to mix the good with the bad enough that people just accept it.
I guess one final question. Looking kind of at products like GitLab versus products like Zulip or maybe like Bitwarden. Do you think it should be allowed to basically have a stipulation in your license that if you're using something for commercial use, you have to pay?
I'm pretty much, me personally, try to make money. Yeah. I'm not going to be an open source purist where things like that, like, oh, you can't call it open source anymore because you're asking for these things. To me, like, the number one thing is we have to be able to know what our computers are doing. That's the number one thing for FUTO. There are computers, we have to know what they're doing. So the only way we can achieve that is open source software. So we have to be able to modify, and we have to be able to modify it and just make sure that it's not doing anything bad. So something like Bitwarden, yeah, I don't see why that causes problems. I mean, maybe other people have. I don't know. Harpo, do you disagree?
I mean, naively just having to pay for software, I think I'm quite happy with. It's more of just like the details of like a question of control. Like, if it's a one-time payment or something, then it's like, pretty clean. But a lot of times you're kind of thinking about like long-term, what are the implications of paying? Well, in the future they can maybe change the price, maybe change the terms of your payment. Some things also are like only valuable in like a social context. So like, if you have like an image format in your image editor, I start out, it's like I get this nice deal, this $5 for Photoshop, and I can do all my work in that. That's what I learn. And then a couple of years from now, Adobe decides to make it $1,000 instead, which for business software might actually be reasonable. And then it's like, the value of that software is now much lower to me because they, other people now have different terms than I did. Right. It's just like kind of like in the weeds. There's just like, yeah, kind of these edge cases. Companies get acquired, terms change, and
the biggest thing that we really want to avoid is a situation where an open source developer sells out to Microsoft.
Yeah, exactly.
And then everybody using that software is like up shit creek. I mean, no, I think that any kind of licenses that do non-competes or anything should be null and void when you sell out. Like, if the company really wants to hire you, fine, they can hire you. But like, it's an open source project. You can't screw over your users selling out to Microsoft or Google or Facebook or whoever else. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I'm just like kind of very interested in like, how we can actually get payments and kind of balance out like some of the more long-term, implications of what that might look like.
So it's open question. We're working on it. We're trying to figure out guidelines and kind of we'll at least have certain things that we do with our projects that try to facilitate this, and we're going to try to encourage other people to make open source a more viable thing.
Actually, one last question. Okay, so you said the payment system should be agnostic. Okay, some people have asked why is this important, or why is this one of the principles as opposed to a FUTO coin? Can you explain why that's important? Or like the payment?
Yeah, so we're just staying away from anything that looks like we're crypto shills. We are not trying to profit by pumping up a currency. I don't know if you're involved with cryptocurrency or not. If you are involved, or just watch, Future Butters on South Park. The crypto shills are really annoying, and some of them are like, some people working in crypto are doing really great work, but we don't want to be confused with the people who are just pumping up coins and not really honestly creating value. So there will never be a FUTO coin.
Sorry.
If you don't control your computers will control you.
That was
if you do not master your computer will become your master.
If you do not master your computer will become your master. It just doesn't flow off the tongue.
Yeah,
it's like when Steve fucked up my catchspace.
If you do, you have to say it like the Sphinx. You have to say it like Sphinx. If you do not master your computer, your computer will become your master.
There you go, right there. No, Steve looked at the camera and said, "That's it for today." And as always, I have a nice day. And like everybody, to this day, people mock that video. The outro was so bad.
To learn my teachings, I must first teach you how to learn.